Welcome to CC, the Classic Car Show. In this episode, we go for a ride in a classic British runabout, affectionately known as the Flying Brick. We test your classic car knowledge with the very tricky Know Your Chrome. Also on the show, a very rare and unusual Italian GT car that is a real head-turner. Plus, we find a classic car collection, a classic of tomorrow that may just well be out of your price range, and a closer look at a Porsche of yesteryear. So pop your shoes off, slip your driving gloves on, and get ready for another armchair cruise in CC Classic Cars. Back in the 60s, when London town was swinging to the sound of 60s sensations, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, one car stood out as an icon of that era. That car was the Mini. First built way back in 1959 by the British Motor Corporation, few cars have stood the test of time as well as a Mini. In fact, manufacture of the car didn't cease until the year 2000, when BMW launched its successor, the new Mini, which has proved to be equally as successful and as much fun to drive and just as popular with a fashion set. Of course, it was in the 60s that the Mini etched its place into popular culture, with well-publicised purchases by film and music stars. But it was John Cooper, designer and builder of Formula One cars, that ultimately unleashed the full potential of this sprightly car when he collaborated with BMC to release the sportier Cooper and Cooper S versions. From 1961, the Cooper Car Company tricked up standard Minis with a racing-tuned engine, twin SU carbs, a closer ratio gearbox and front disc brakes. The public loved them, with more than 100,000 Coopers sold. A more powerful version, dubbed the S, was also developed, and it was these cars that went on to become hugely successful on the world racing circuit. This is a 68 Mark I Mini Cooper S, and it's the pride and joy of Alan Marks. Alan bought the vehicle just 8 years ago after his wife, who had become a little tired of their existing car, suggested that a Cooper S would make the ideal choice as a replacement. This was the start of a journey that had more than its fair share of challenges.
So the big search began right through the country, and eventually found one up in some distance from home in boxes. Everything was in boxes, and the motor sat on the back seat. Steering wheel was laying somewhere else in this chap's workshop.
The previous owner had begun the process of restoring the Cooper S, but had given up, leaving the car and its engine in a real mess. Fortunately, Alan knew of a great mechanic that was willing to take up the challenge of restoring the vehicle to its former glory in just 3 months. After sorting through all the boxes, the restoration of this classic Mini could begin. Thankfully, all the parts were located. All were original and most were in working order. Some components were a little worn, and some needed to be replaced. However, the engine was meticulously reconditioned, and Alan's mechanic even managed to open up the engine a little to 1310cc, which gives the car a top speed of 105 miles per hour, or about 168 kilometres per hour.
He rebuilt the motor from start to finish. The paintwork was done by an absolute expert, and I'm over the moon with it. I think it's a beautiful motor car.
During its 41-year history, the Mini had 3 major updates and came in a range of body shapes. Sales of the Mark I, built between 1959 and 1967, were slow at first, but production totaled an impressive 1.2 million. When the last Mini, also a red Cooper, rolled off the production line in the year 2000, a very grand total of 5,387,862 cars had been manufactured. Minis have always been considered cool, and it's not surprising when you consider the long list of celebrity owners. John Lennon, Britt Ekland and Peter Sellers, to name but a few. It's also a sad fact that the famous British rock star and T-Rex lead singer, Mark Bolden, suffered a fatal accident as a passenger in a 1275 GT in 1976. Minis were famous for being dangerous. In the Mark I, safety features such as seatbelts and door mirrors were optional extras. It's even said that the car's designer, Sir Alec Isengonis, once quipped that he made cars with such good brakes and steering that if people get into a crash, it's their own fault. And maybe that's the secret of the Mini's success. Sure, they're a little bit dangerous, but they're very, very cool, and combined with their incredible racing pedigree, the Mini Cooper S has become an icon not just of 60s chic, but of classic motoring in general.
It's been a very, very successful exercise right from start up until this time. 8 years I've had it on the road, so we've had 8 years of magnificent motoring with it. They're a really, really great fun car.
Here's a challenge for all you classic car fans. Know Your Chrome gives you a peek at some close-ups of classic chrome. Look at the shapes. Do you recognise the lines? Can you tell which car sports this shiny styling? It's too early for clues, but we can tell you it's a car, it's a classic, and it's very, very cool. Look closely, and we'll give you more hints later in the show. Next on CC, the Classic Car Show. A classic car collector lets us in the garage, a classic of tomorrow, and we look at a shape that never changes. Meet Dennis. He's an avid car collector. Engine oil is running through his veins. His father worked for General Motors. Dennis got hooked at a fairly young age, and as soon as he could afford to buy cars, he was sure to pick ones that were fairly difficult to come by.
The first car was an Austin Healey, but since then I've bought cars and in some cases have had them professionally restored. I have a 1950 Australian car called a Holden. My father bought that brand new in 1950. I have a 1962 Australian car called a Holden, looks a bit like an American Chev, and I bought that at 10,000 miles when it was 12 months old. I've got a 1923 Fiat, which I bought while it was still running, but in a very sorry condition, so I had that professionally restored. And then I have the Jensen Healey.
Dennis stores his collection in 2 garages, along with an impressive array of models, photographs and memorabilia. Over the years, he has accumulated a wide range of models, which he has classified by make and country of manufacture. These are displayed in a number of display cases in his garage, and some of these are extremely rare. Take this Jaguar XJ220, or this old SS Mercedes for example. Dennis has a complete collection of all the Australian-made General Motors and Ford Motor cars, which are unique to Australia. For the most part though, Dennis's collection is mostly influenced by his own past and the vehicles he's owned and driven over the years.
I keep a documented history of all of the cars that I've got. I've got folders with each car. In that folder, all the service records. I've got, in some cases with some of the cars, the actual new car brochures that went with the car. I've got a collection of photographs that have been taken of the car in various rallies.
Both Dennis and his wife worked in North America for a while, and they both collected a number of things then. In addition to an extensive collection of number plates, mainly from the different states in the US, he's kept some old photos of cars that he drove during that time. Of course, he would have loved to bring them home, but was reluctant to have to deal with the dramas of importing vehicles. Dennis has crammed his collection into every spare bit of space that he has, even though he and his wife only recently built a new home with enough garage space to house his cars. In addition to what you see here, Dennis also has another garage which was filled with a car that belongs to his son, as well as many boxes full of spare parts. So it's no surprise that he's already running short of room. But what does Dennis plan to do with his collection?
Yeah, my collection, I intended never to sell any of them. I've got a son who's a car enthusiast and a daughter who is a car enthusiast, so obviously when I fall off the perch, the son and daughter will have to work out between them who has what.
So there you have it. You really don't have to be a rich oil tycoon or media magnate to own a collection of classic cars. But you'd better get a bigger garage. It's not just sports cars that become classics of tomorrow. If a car is in any way unique, it'll have a good shot at becoming a future collector car. And this Bentley Mulsanne definitely fits into that category. The Bentley Mulsanne is a high-end luxury vehicle, made by Bentley Motors in the UK. Bentley are famous for their approach to car design. Large limousine-style bodies with tons of power and torque under the hood. These cars are all about luxury and performance. Sure, you won't see one spinning around your local racetrack, but they still pack a punch. That's not to say that Bentleys can't perform. In 2003, two Bentley Speed 8 prototype racing cars came first and second at Le Mans. The design of the Mulsanne is a nod to yesteryear, with the classic style radiator grille and round headlamps. Bentley have slowly moved away from the angular box design, dominating cars from the 1970s through to the early 90s. So what makes this particular Bentley a classic of tomorrow? Firstly, it's a Bentley, and they are still hand-built. Secondly, the Mulsanne is the top-of-the-range model, with a price tag of over £220,000, or about $350,000 US, which will ensure this vehicle remains a rare find. And along with that starting price comes a ton of extra features and customisations. Cars at Bentley are often made to order, and buyers can select from a range of timbers, hides and colours to ensure their Bentley Mulsanne is truly a unique car. It may only be a reality for the wealthy, but the Bentley Mulsanne will definitely become a classic of tomorrow. Back in 1963, a car was created that has helped define the shape of sports cars ever since. Car designer Dr. Ferdinand Porsche took the Volkswagen Beetle, a car he had designed over a decade earlier, and used it as the base to create his iconic Porsche 911. Just like the Beetle, the 911 had its air-cooled engine at the back over rear independent suspension. With a larger bore engine and some spectacular aerodynamics, the Porsche 911 was hailed as a giant leap in car design.
Porsche is a classic design shape, and it's in the National Motor Museum for that very reason. Some people regard Porsche as an ugly car, others sing their accolades about their design shape. Porsche has had a number of attempts at changing the shape with the 928 and the 944. However, none of those have lasted the test of time like the classic 911 shape.
What we are looking at here is a 1976 Porsche 911 Carrera. Many consider this 911 to be the quintessential street legal racing car. The 911 Carrera RS was developed so Porsche could race in production car races, where it was a requirement that minimum numbers of commercial production vehicles were built. This turned out to be a win-win for Porsche, with cars performing incredibly well in competition and also gaining a devoted following from buyers due to its stellar performance and head-turning looks. The 911 Carrera RS differed from previous model 911s with more power, a reworked rear suspension, some modern styling, especially around the bumpers, and most notable of all, the whale tail or ducktail spoiler that defined the vehicle for generations of road users. The Porsche 911 went on to win a host of racing accolades from the mid to late 1970s, including a dozen of 24-hour Le Mans races. Racing pedigree aside, we have to agree the Porsche 911 Carrera is more than just a classic car. It's a work of art that has essentially continued relatively unchanged for over 5 decades. The Porsche 911 is without doubt a true classic car. So how well did you go with your first peek? How well did you know your chrome? Here's a quick update. Did you guess it right away, or are you still pondering? Take a look at these shots. We're showing you a little more of the car here, so you should be able to pick it. The answer is coming soon. Next on CC Classic Cars, a very rare Italian find, and we reveal the Know Your Chrome mystery car. It's been said that all roads lead to Rome, and in the case of this rare and pristine example of a 1965 Lancia Familia GTL, it seems that this is very, very true. Lancia had a habit of naming their cars after Roman roads. There's an Aprilia, an Aurelia, and there's the Flaminia, which was named after the Via Flaminia, the road leading from Rome to Rimini. This stunning example is the prized possession of Michael Warpler, a lifelong lover of Italian cars.
I was a member of the Sporting Car Club at the time, and the car was simply advertised on the pinboard there. An old photograph, already curling at the edges, and I thought that it would long have been sold. And whoopee, the car was still there, still for sale. I went to have a look at it, and the decision was made. That was my car.
As the car wasn't drivable at the time, Michael immediately arranged for the car to be sent by trailer to a local restoration company. Michael and his team of restorers then faced a major problem. Unfortunately, the previous owner had used well water from his farm to top up the car's radiator. This resulted in very heavy deposits in the cooling system, and the engine needed to be stripped down completely in order to remove all these calcium deposits.
We found a way, by immersing the engine in a huge tub of molasses, thinned down with water. Left it there for a fortnight, and it was as bright as a new penny when it came out.
Strangely enough, the most renowned specialist for Flaminia cars is not based in Italy, but in Norwich, England. And it was through this company that Michael was able to purchase all the gaskets and other spare parts that were needed to rebuild the engine.
When we put the engine back together again, we pressed the starter button and it sprang into life immediately and ran from there on.
Between 1957 and 1967, the Flaminia had quite a wide model range. It came as a Berliner or saloon, a 4-seater coupe by Pininfarina, and there were 2 models by Carrozzeria Touring of Milan, the GT, a 2-seater with a short wheelbase, and the GTL with a longer wheelbase and 2 token seats in the rear. Both the GT and GTL featured aluminium bodies, and both can easily be identified by their 4 round headlights. There were 2 further models by Zagato of Milan, a Sport and a Super Sport. These were the top of the range models, and today fetch enormous prices as very few were ever built. There were just 300 Lancia Familia GTLs manufactured. 295 of these featured left-hand steering, and just 5 were built with right-hand controls. This car is one of those 5, a very rare piece of motoring history. Flaminia's engine was an evolution of the world's first V6, which was introduced by its predecessor, the Aurelia. The GT model sported a powerful 2.8 litre engine with a triple-barrel carburettor. This produced a lot of torque, lightning acceleration and a fast top speed. In fact, this car's top speed is 196 kilometres an hour, exactly the same as the top speed quoted in the original sales brochure. And you don't have to stick to those straight Roman roads, as the handling of these cars is second to none.
An Italian car just challenges you to drive it quick, snappy, don't hang about. The handling of those cars is just beyond description. The sound of the engine, the way they rev up, the style of the body, all those things come together and make Italian cars unique, and that's what I like about them.
Michael's Flaminia is an exceptional example of a prestige Italian car. It's in pristine condition with low mileage, so you'd expect him to store it away in a garage or museum somewhere, but this is not the case.
I bought it with only 14,000 miles on the clock, and it now has 36,000 miles on the clock, and the difference between the two was sheer driving pleasure.
How well did you know your chrome? If you said it was a 1966 Ford Mustang, you'd be right. Built in the USA from 1964 right through until now, the Mustang is considered the first muscle car and inspired a whole new type of vehicle design. The classic Mustang shape is said to be the catalyst for other cars like the Ford Capri, Toyota Celica and the Chevrolet Camaro. Classic cars are everywhere. Some are family runabouts still on the road, while others are the result of a grueling restoration. One thing is for sure, cars inspire the imagination of so many, from drivers to children, and a classic car can turn heads like no other, be it sports cars or classic sedans. They may not be the answer to your commuting needs, but they have a soul and character that we see every day at CC. Classic Cars.